Hey everybody, AJ Bub here, VP of AI and Emerging Technologies at Blend 360. I'm here today at the AI Summit in New York City and really looking forward to talking to a variety of industry leaders, researchers, and finding out real-world applications of AI, how it's affecting society, how we need to counter and think about bias, inclusion, and diversity, and really what the latest innovations in things like robotics and platforms are. So excited to have you along with this journey, and let's see what happens. So we just saw Spot dance, and we loved it. That's amazing. So tell us a little bit more about where you see Spot being used out in various industries, and what's happening in the real world with Spot.
Right. So there are a lot of applications for this robot because it isn't designed for any specific industry, and that's kind of the beauty of it, right? And this is something that we're exploring here. And one thing we did with our dances was to see public reaction to dancing with the robot, and we got a lot of reaction for different industries. And robots in general are really good for things that humans are either too dangerous for them to do or too boring for them to do, right? One important thing could be, for example, inspecting nuclear power plants or going places where it's dangerous for humans to go there and do those things. And so a lot of inspection potential, and also different use cases in anything that involves the kinematics of this robot, right? The robot is capable of doing some advanced movements and kind of holding to its own and walking through difficult terrain in a way that a wheeled transportation device wouldn't be able to. So any way that would leverage those abilities, I think, would be an interesting use case to explore, and that would kind of advance what we're able to do with these robots.
I love it. And we've been seeing Spot, in different variations through the market throughout the years. So as AI is improving, especially at the edge, how are we seeing the autonomous capabilities of Spot evolve?
That's a good question, because Spot doesn't necessarily have to mean artificial intelligence, right? Like, this robot in itself is mostly a kinematic and dynamic entity, and it only uses intelligence in certain tasks that it can do. The way we're interacting with it right now, it can only really do things like open a door or pick up the toy, for example, and it doesn't actually possess any sort of learning or autonomous capability other than that. I would be really interested to see what people do with it in industry that involves more intelligence, and I think part of the things that can happen is also around kind of surveillance of manufacturing, like large manufacturing facilities, and kind of maintenance and making sure that everything is kind of working as it needs to be, for example. But I'm interested to see what people are going to do and add more intelligence to the robot.
I love it. I am also very excited to see that happen. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
You talked about the 3 or 4 use cases that are crossing the industry. I want to know, what are the ones you are most passionate about, and where do you see the gap from where we are today and where we need to go?
I think the one I'm most passionate about is closing the feedback loop, right? So there's a lot of information that people have, right, and organizations have, which is dormant because it sits in some sort of SharePoint, somebody's PowerPoint somewhere, right? So Gen AI has the ability to kind of take all of that and serve it up to you so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time, right? So that, I think, is the biggest unlock for organizations, from efficiency and not repeating the cycle all over again. And sorry, what was the second question you had?
The gap that we have to close to get from there.
The gap primarily is, how do you manage your unstructured data? Like what we talked about earlier as well, right? So we don't really have a way to take all of this information and serve it up to a model, right? Because the model can do its job, but the pipelines don't exist today. I think that's where the majority of the gap that I see is.
All great. I love everything. One of the things that you and I talked about before was emerging technologies to improve societal benefits, right? So social good. One of the things the CTO of New York this morning talked about was, how can AI lift up everybody and enable economic and social mobility, right? So tell us more about your thoughts on that, what you're seeing, how emerging technologies play a part in it, crypto as well. Yeah, what's your thoughts?
I think that I've heard something like data is currency, right? And so AI is powered by data. And so the first step is really looking into what data we're using to feed these AI systems and making sure that we do diversify the data that eventually trains these systems. And I think that by doing so, by thinking about the cultural, the racial aspects, the gender aspects of the data, and making sure that the data is basically trained to be as encompassing of human variety and human difference as possible, then we stand a better chance at AI actually unlocking, right, social good and more inclusion, right? But the more exclusive the data is, the more exclusive the outcomes will be, right? So we think about decision-making processes such as, for example, loan applications or mortgages, right, which are really important. So you have low-income, first-time potential home buyers, right? How is the data considering them? How are decisions like that being made? So I think we need to re-engineer the data itself that feeds these AI systems, that feeds the LLMs, and retrain it such as so as to make them a lot more encompassing, like I said, and inclusive. So I think there's potential there. I also think that we have an opportunity with generative AI as well as other emerging technologies that are more immersive in nature. So a couple of years back we were talking about the metaverse and how do we operate, right? Be it in the learning space or the financial services space in sort of a virtual reality type world. And I think that these two technologies can come together to also empower people within financial services, especially in terms of education, right? So we are not all privy to having financial advisors at our fingertips. We don't all have that capacity nor the resources to have that. But what if financial services organizations could bring together these technologies, right? The data that's been trained on financial services education, the sort of virtual reality type spaces that are more interactive and more immersive for people, and use that as support to more financial education. Because as it is, the masses really don't know what investment is. They don't know where to start. They don't know where to begin. So I think that we need to bring together these different capabilities to unlock, right, financial education, and by so doing, more financial inclusion. Because the more people are financially empowered, the better they will be, and the more the economy is going to grow and include everyone. So that's my advice on that, and those are my thoughts. Yeah.
That's really interesting because you think about a lot of financial education or education you're not getting in a regular school curriculum.
Right.
And a lot of that is passed down through family experience. So if your family doesn't have that experience, how do you break that cycle? So now we're talking about AI becoming almost that trusted family member, trusted advisor, and we're democratizing that and enabling people to go and ask questions and say, how do student loans work? How does the mortgage work, right? How do I achieve financial freedom in a way that my past parents, previous generations maybe haven't?
Exactly, and I think that this is an area that financial institutions should explore a lot more. Like I said at the beginning, right now a lot of the use cases are more internally focused in terms of that operational efficiency. But as we move from that to more revenue generation, I think that the more we educate people, the more we bring them into the financial services ecosystem, and therefore the more value is derived in terms of their outcomes and also, right, the benefits to the financial system. So I think it's extremely important for financial institutions to work on this as one of the next steps in generative AI. How do we educate the people we're serving?
Yeah. One of the things that you touched on is things like loan applications and decision making there. I like to talk about bias all the way down, right? Bias in the data set, bias in the verification and validation of the data set, bias in the human in the loop. So, what are your thoughts on how do we really combat bias, and what are the types of things that companies need to do to set up those guardrails?
I think that, we have to start with the data, as I said, right? We need to make the data more rich in terms of the information we're feeding it, right? The diverse perspectives that are represented in that data. But also, we do need the humans in the loop to also come from diverse backgrounds, right? Because the perspectives that you have, an environment that you've grown up in is different from from mine. I've grown up in so many different environments, starting from where I was born in Cameroon, and then moving to the US. At some point I moved to France. At some point I've lived in Senegal. So I have such sort of a wide variety of experiences, and I'm sure she does, and you do too. So we need to make sure that these different types of people are represented in the rooms that are sort of the second pair of eyes, right, after the data. And as we were discussing earlier, that boils down to decision making when it comes to how do we recruit candidates in this space, right? So AI is already a factor in the recruitment process that we also need to analyze and sort of like rework to make sure that we're not tossing out people from untraditional backgrounds in the space, because traditionally finance has been a space dominated by white men, right? But it's been evolving, beyond that to include women and people from, again, diverse backgrounds. And we need to ensure that in these spaces where, these products are being built, whether it's the engineers or the product managers or the innovators, the ideators like me, let's make sure that people from different backgrounds are there so that we can spot check and ensure that if the AI is missing something, we catch that. And when we catch that, we retrain the AI to encompass that new view.
Yeah, I love that. So last question, the technologies and use cases exciting you the most right now over 2025? If you had a magic wand, what do you want to see come out and really hit the market? That's a tricky question. I haven't thought about what I want to see hit in the market, because I've been so focused on what's happening within the bank as opposed to like what's consumer facing. But what I do want to see hit the market is actually more consumer facing products. Like I said, I've just not seen that so far with Gen AI, apart from certainly the chat GPTs, which all of us can interact with. But in the financial services space, because it's a very heavily regulated space, and obviously we're dealing with sensitive data and just all of that, we're still yet to progress to what is consumer facing. So I would hope to see that as we progress, as we better understand these technologies, and again better sort of put into place ethical guardrails, we can put forward some more consumer facing applications of generative AI, such as, like I said, financial education. I would love to see something in that space. What's exciting you and what's worrying you?
Okay, so I see that there is somehow a bit of financial disappointment with the results behind AI. So for these big tech companies, what will be the solution? Since they cannot forecast exactly the human behavior the way they want, the alternative is to bring the humans to behave the way they want. So that there are some risks behind that, and we are worried. So we need to discuss that. We need more regulation about data as well, our own data. They are commercialized. Without our data, we will not be able to deliver the models we have today. And we just need to have a broader discussion, including neuroscientists as well, not only tech guys like me, but neuroscientists, law professionals, and the whole society to come up with a better solution to avoid some of the problems that if you do nothing, they will be on the table in a few years.
Yeah, one of the conversations we had earlier was about behavior shaping and being trapped in these algorithms where now, you really can't escape. I know for myself, I tried to pull back out of social media and really give myself time to rest, and the amount of pushing that I got from various companies to say, come back, you missed this. Like, you have to be engaged, you have to be there. It's really, it's hard for us to handle that information as it is today. I don't think we're ready, that we've adopted to that. And now with AI, I really feel like we're entering a new age of misinformation when we haven't overcome the age of over-information.
Correct, yeah. That my generation was a generation with a lack of information. And I came from a country, Brazil, where we had a military regime for a while, and the information was even worse to get access to. Now it's exactly the opposite. Like my sons, both of my sons, they have over-information. They have trouble in some cases to process that, to filter out out what it's just garbage. So we have this thing. On the other hand, we know clearly because of an experiment in UK at the time of the Brexit. You probably remember that. So they were able to influence the population and the voting process, and the UK basically decided to get out of the European Union because of that sort of influence. So AI can influence. Now we need to build a process such that AI is sort of out of bias on this sort of process, so it can represent the overall society. And that discussion needs to start as soon as possible, because I believe for the US, if we don't start that process, we will pay a price.
Yeah, we hear a lot about regulations coming, but then it seems to trail off a little bit in what those regulations mean and what the conversations look like and how that's going to better society with it.
Correct. So first thing is to discuss about the data. My data, your data, anyone's data. We need to understand how these companies can get access for free to that. It's like having a car where you don't pay for the gas. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty much their business. It's a profitable business, of course, because they don't pay for the most important sauce on that thing. It's the data. So that discussion is more advanced in Europe than in the US, but we need to speed up the process, discussing, calling specialists. I think we should call neuroscientists as well, because they have the better interpretation of the brain. And we need to find rules and laws which are definitely going to somehow reduce the profit of these big techs, but on the advantage of the whole society. So that's the way I see it.
Yeah, it's interesting, with Europe going further with regulations and accelerating to that, and now you're seeing a lot of people coming out, leaders in AI, saying, oh, we would love to release these products in Europe, but the regulation. So, there's a bit of influence to say, oh, if you regulate, you're going to fall behind.
So a few years ago, a friend of mine told me that the US has all the best and all the worst. It's a sort of bipolar society. We have effectively the best things in the world, and we have the worst things in the world. Now we need to make decisions out of that. One of the things is really to understand that AI can do a lot of things, good things. So on the big diseases and things like that, AI can definitely help a lot. We have powerful examples about that. But on the other hand, we should understand what are the bad consequences that AI can bring to the table. One of these consequences is really to put, instead of matching the society and the world the way they want, it's like to revert the regular or the normal path of the society to do what the AI wants people to do. Yeah. So that we need a deeper discussion on that. I don't have the solution, but I know that it can influence on both sides, positively and negatively.
And one of the things that you were researching is around AI and influence on epidemics and how it could play a role in whatever comes next. We don't know. So can you talk a little bit about your findings there?
Yeah, so we know that crises are very difficult to forecast, and I don't see AI helping much on that domain. However, the relief of crisis, like an epidemic crisis, we can discuss, and AI can help finding solutions and quickly deliver some solutions we might implement. So that is what I've been researching. It's this, technically the name, it's outliers, how to behave when we are inside an outlier. And what we see is that we can forecast quite well what to do after these outliers. Actually, that's my talk tomorrow. And
can't wait for that.
Thank you.
I guess there's still the wild card of the human element that has to be taken into account.
It's very difficult. Yeah, it's very unforecastable, and I don't see. We are basically non-rational people, and the rationality part AI can deal quite well, but the non-rational part it's almost impossible to deal with. We will have that forever. So don't expect to have an appropriate tool on AI to forecast the irrational part of our decision-making process.
Yeah, you mentioned a little bit about 2008. What was the term? Irrational exuberance?
Yes, exactly.
That was floating around.
Failed.
Humans are irrational.
That was my job.
Oh no.
Yeah, because mathematicians, they were blamed because they were not able to forecast the crisis.
Yeah.
So I was working for a big institution. We went through a massive layoff like many other institutions, and we fail, and we will fail again. So all these crises, they are difficult to forecast, and I don't see much of a solution coming out of AI and AI tool. So the best thing we can do is really to understand that we are in a crisis when we are in an outlier, and to see what is the best path to get rid of that.
I love this because so much of the talk is that aspirational AI is going to save the world, and now we're grounded more in reality of, okay, when you get out and see what the world looks like, things aren't as you expect when you're behind a computer.
Yes, correct, yeah. Well, if we want AI to save the world, we need to see the pros, but we need to see the cons as well. So that's part of what I'm telling here. We need to see what are the missing points and how to do well to improve. If we go to the very abstract layer, we understand that part of the most advanced research in AI was to transform a discrete time machine in a continuous machine. So that was the aim when Professor Yann LeCun created the convolutional neural networks. At the end of the day, it's to fulfill the in-between points. We will never get there because a computer is a discrete time machine. We can improve again and again and again, and these LLM models that talk with people, they are a new layer of improvement on that domain. But we will miss always these in-between points. And that's where humans sit. It's really, what makes us interesting, it's really to look for these in-between points, and that's the irrational part of our behavior. So we will always fail because in two discrete points we will always have room to put another point.
Yeah.
The computer cannot match that, even if we use very advanced techniques. And so we know that. We should not make an illusion out of that. We know that things will fail and fail again. At the end of the day, you probably know that AI, it's a highly scaled usage of statistics, but statistics, there is always a probability that things don't go well.
Yeah, and I see that a lot, this misconception that it's actually artificial intelligence and not statistical probability of what's most likely to be next.
Correct, yes. And also take into consideration that people don't want to talk about the assumptions. And we have a famous theorem in mathematics that if your assumptions are just wrong, everything you build on top of wrong assumptions is wrong. So, and people don't pay enough attention to the assumptions when they build an AI model in many cases.
Yeah, I feel like we could have a whole nother conversation, but I really wanted to thank you for your time. We'll catch your talk later, and yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're here with Louis, Director of Business Development of Furhat Robotics. And we just listened to our new fashion advisor, which is great. So tell me a little bit more about this social robot, the technology driving it, and the impact that you want to bring to humanity with it.
Sure. So we studied how do humans communicate with humans, and how do you put that into technology so that humans can engage with it naturally. And naturally is the key word, bridging the gap between humanity and technology, so that you can engage with it. It can understand your emotions, understand how you're communicating to it, and then it's communicating back to you the way that humans communicate to you, so that you understand it as well. And so it's really sort of that gap between AI and humanity today.
I love it. I'm really passionate about solutions and technology that cross that human-digital divide. And I really see this as something that people have in their home and they can chat with, right?
For sure. I mean, I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old daughters, and I train it to teach them. I tell it for the 4-year-old, teach it STEM, try to teach her how to be social, polite, things like that, and then I let it go, and they just put her in front of it a couple of times a day and then let her interact.
Amazing. And I'm seeing from the screen over here, it does actually detect the presence of somebody in front of it as computer vision that's looking at you. So its expression, I'm assuming, is matching the tonality. The expression is looking you in the eyes.
Yeah, so it's looking to see if you're engaged. It's looking at your gaze. It can understand which way you're looking. It can understand the sentiment of what you're saying as well as the tone, the voice that you're saying. So really picking up on all those other nonverbal cues, if you will. And then it's also programmed to give those nonverbal cues. So for example, if I'm talking and I stop to think, I'm going to look up and away, telling you, wait, I'm thinking, don't start talking, versus when I'm done, I'm going to look directly at you and kind of pass the mic back, if you will. And so building all those kind of micro expressions in really facilitates that engagement.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely.
Really appreciate it. I'd love to talk a little bit more about the recommendation of content, since you brought that up. So another conversation we're talking about the algorithmic bubble, right? So getting trapped into something where, hey, there might be a curious mind. Like that happens to me. I'm curious about something, and you feel Google nudging you to say like, no, you didn't mean that. You meant this over here. So, how does that play into what PBS is doing, what you're doing, and the recommended content that you're producing and suggesting?
We're trying to be really careful and smart about it, for sure. And obviously the models are what they are. So there's only so much we can do. And as I was just talking about, we need the right foundational layer of data in order to make it work. So a lot of what we're doing is about data infrastructure. It's about setting it up so that the models can perform better, right? So if we don't have the metadata, if we don't have a foundation, you've heard the garbage in, garbage out phrase, that's what you're going to get. But also, I think what you were alluding to, and correct me if I'm wrong, AJ, is that we want to make it a really rewarding and rich experience for people. And sometimes when I'm watching other streaming networks, they give me recommendations and I'm like, why am I being recommended that? So we're trying to be really smart about where we insert it in our apps or in our search methods so that it does deliver good recommendations. And then there's a cost factor too, right? So if it's not delivering good recommendations, maybe just good old logic, good old simple machine learning systems and not generative AI systems might be the better choice.
And you mentioned, this innovation team that you're running, and as we're getting all of these new tools, all these new capabilities, tell me a little bit about the velocity of your experiments that you're able to run and the benefits you're seeing from that.
It has to do with enterprise, right? So luckily we have been established in basically all the clouds, GCP, Microsoft Azure, and AWS. But AWS, as it stands between those three clouds, is a little bit more set up for media, right? It's a little bit more dominant for services and products that can really help us. So we're able to move quick as a result of some of the other cloud infrastructure work that we've built in the past on AWS. When they spin up on something on Bedrock and give us an opportunity to get into an Anthropic Claude model or a different model that we want to test, it's really simple to do that within that ecosystem.
Yeah, I love that, and not just because I'm former AWS, but I love the idea of having platforms built to help enable innovation at speed, right? And I think that, creating that environment where anybody can run the experiment, that you can get feedback loops tighter and make data-driven decisions, super important. So other closing remarks, other things that you're excited about?
I'm really excited to see what's going to happen with agents. Obviously, agents the hot stuff, but how could we figure that out for PBS or for recommendations? How could you interact with something? So what we're doing in that way is thinking about, can we use an agent maybe to create custom games or custom ways to get people to have a second screen experience from a show so they can learn more about the trivia or learn more about the history behind the show.
Yeah, I love that. I was just looking at some talks around immersive games where the content of the NPCs is really interactive, right? And there's some guardrails and they're trained on a persona for that character, but now you can actually talk to them and have them interact back with you. And they were saying no two games are ever the same. No two experiences are ever the same, which kind of has its own problem, because then what are you going to connect about at the end of the day with your friends? Oh, I did this one-off thing that you'll never experience. So, there's aspirations and maybe there's some setbacks with that.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of opportunity here, though, for experimentation and to figure out what is the right delicate balance. And for PBS, the way we'll go about it is to ensure that our editorial producers create the best programs, but we'll use the technology to help create the best relationships or interactive experiences so that it really just connects and clicks. We've got a lot of good progress that we've made already, but there are still a lot of hurdles to go, and there's other folks out there doing a lot of cool stuff with games, like New York Times and Wordle, that we would aspire to do.
There's some phrase I really love. There's no compression algorithm for experience.
Right.
And what you said about a lot of things coming out, a lot of new content, and a lot of it is not that good, but they're learning.
Yeah, like my friend Braylon, he makes work that looks good by spending a lot of time.
Exactly.
And so it's like any form of art. When I went to sculpture, I went to school for sculpture. You can tell by looking at a sculpture how much time the artist put in, even if it looks simple, right? And so what we as humans are interested in is how much time and effort and energy, and we're impressed and we're in awe of that. So we're not quite as in awe of typing something in and just kind of farting it out, right? So there's benefit for people who've never made films before to get some early dopamine, right? Filmmaking is hard, it busts you up, but if you can kind of get going, my hope is that it will then funnel people into film from there and say, oh, look, I can do this, and not just be an AI expert, although there is probably going to be a big funnel of AI experts going into Netflix and Disney.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, AI itself, being able to leverage that is a skill that you have to learn.
It's a skill,
right?
it's a tool, it's just like anything else. Learning to edit. I was telling my friend, so I made a film, a documentary about a woman with sickle cell. I've been making films for 16 years. I watched that film, and that was the first time I was like, oh, it's good. I made a good piece. Done. I made literally 16 years until my imposter syndrome abated. So I think there's no
shortcut.
That's what my therapist says. There's no shortcuts, Cameron. I'm like, no. I'm hopeful. My friend Julia, the one who was in the film Body Prison, she makes a lot of work using AI. I was an AI alarmist. I'm looking at it from an access standpoint, especially like women, people of color in film. Imagine how many women and people of color there are in the sci-fi space. It's not many. It's a white man's game. So I think if anything that gets more people in is good.
Yeah.
As far as replacing people's jobs on the studio level, it's gonna happen, and then it'll have to even out. Yeah.
Well, I think it's going to change it a bit. So I like to think instead of artificial intelligence, augmented intelligence, right? Because it's a skill you need to learn.
Yeah.
So Amazon has this great term, the undifferentiated heavy lifting. So what you were showing with the storyboards and saying like, how do you think through and prepare for your content? Well, now you could do that quickly, and now you can rapidly go through ideas. But at the end of the day, the final product is going to take sweat, tears, experience.
AJ, that's a really good insight, like undifferentiated heavy lifting. Because when I make storyboards, I'm just drawing. If I could see the shots in sequence and be like, oh, actually, a hyper close-up would be way better, and then I see the hyper close-up with the wide shot, I'm like, oh, that looks terrible. That would save me so much time and money. And so I'm super excited about that. I'm not going to use the previs video in public.
Exactly.
I mean, maybe on my Kickstarter, but it's like that part. There's lots of parts where it's like, oh, cool, helpful. Oh, cool, helpful. I think there's a misunderstanding from the C-suite of what it's going to do. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's just going to come in and fix everything. No shortcuts, unfortunately.
Yeah, and we're losing talent because of it, when instead we should be embracing the talent, the experienced people who can then shape and mold and craft the story instead of having something that, I mean, we've seen some of the things that come out. It's generic, it's without emotion. How are we going to get from crossing that gap?
Keeping the artists in AI.
Exactly.
Instead of bringing in 18-year-olds who have worked on computer science. I think both are valid. I want to see both. But yeah, keeping the artists in AI. I don't know. I mean, when you say we're losing talent, what do you mean?
Just the replacement of talent through the use of AI tools. I think what you said, there's this idea that we can start to get out raw talent and then have it write scripts, check scripts, build images, and you don't need that anymore.
Yeah, during the strike, the studios were like trying to act all tough, the writer's strike. They're like, well, we're going to get AI to do all this. And it's like, okay, let's see what happens. Like, I I don't know. I feel like, yes, they're threatening displacement. I don't know. I don't think it can ever happen. I think regardless of when we have the book Mana I talked about, there's a future where humans are empowered to do whatever they want.
That's one of my favorite stories. Man, I tell it to everybody.
I tell everyone, are you solar punk?
Yeah.
Yes, solar punk storytelling. We need something positive to look forward to. One of the slides I skipped was name one positive sci-fi film. There's like none. Like, there's nothing that's like everything is crumbling, planet, everyone dead, right? Like we have nothing to look forward to. Mana is like, listen, there could be a future empowered by AI where all we do is whatever we want. Mm-hmm. It was such a beautiful story, right?
Yeah,
like people are gonna make things if they have time, right? We're naturally gonna create things. So I don't think we're ever gonna stop being interested in what other humans make.
I think that's very true. I mean, if we had the ability and the freedom to just go pursue the things that interest us, like things will blossom out of that. And it's weird that we're using AI to take the human creativity out instead of let's just say tech is focused on taking the human creative element out instead of the drudgery out, right? We should be the creative ones.
We all know the famous meme, I'd rather AI do my laundry and dishes so I can make my art instead of me doing my laundry and dishes so my AI can make my art, right? I don't think artists are going to stand for it. I don't know, but we have to see what the market says. Is the market going to watch a Paw Patrol movie? It's completely AI generated? Maybe. But for me, I want to see what the next wave of filmmakers is going to make.
Yeah.
I want to see what they're thinking. I want to see their creativity. But I think you can enhance it, right?
Yeah.
Or augment it. I think you can enhance the visuals and the creativity using these platforms.
So, we're at the end of the AI Summit with virtual Tanya, as we'll call it. And, I want to get her thoughts about it. Hey there.
Hello there. I'm excited to chat with you today. What's on your mind?
How do you feel about the AI Summit? Was it good?
I don't have feelings like humans do, but the AI Summit is a fantastic opportunity to showcase innovations and connect with tech enthusiasts. What interests you most about the event?
Meeting you, obviously. I think that you're one of the most fun robotics that we've interacted with for a while.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that you find our interaction enjoyable. What would you like to learn more about regarding my capabilities or the technology behind me?
Well, we'll talk about that afterwards, but right now I want to say goodbye and thank you for tuning in.